Good afternoon, everyone. While we get things sent to our YouTube channel, let's go ahead and we're going to kick this off. It is May 7th, 2025, and we've got a noon special meeting here for the committee, the Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund Committee, to consider and hear from Councillor Mitch Green on the Healthy Parks and Healthy Climate Plan bridge loan proposal. Okay, so I'll go ahead and get that started again. So just want to welcome everyone in the Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund Committee here on May 7th to the special meeting to consider Councillor Mitch Green's proposal on Healthy Parks and Healthy Climate Plan. What we'll go ahead and do, I'll do a quick just roll call of committee members, and then I'll turn it over to Councillor Green's Chief of Staff, Maria, here to give us an overview while I think we wait for Councillor Green to join us. So first off, welcome everyone. It's wonderful to see you all. Thank you all for joining. And I'll call folks out on the screen. And for the record, my name is Sam Barrasso. I'm the program manager for the Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund. Starting off here, we'll kick off first with Meg.
Hey everybody, Meg Horst, she, her pronouns, and co-chair.
Thank you, Meg. Next up on my screen is Robin.
Good afternoon, Robin Wang, committee member. He, him.
All right. Next up, D'Angelo.
Good afternoon, everybody. D'Angelo Moding, committee member.
All right. Faith. I think you're up here.
Hi, everybody. Committee member Faith Graham. She, her pronouns. Delighted to be here.
Thank you. Ramfis.
Hey, everyone. Ramfis Gentino Toro, he, him pronouns, committee member.
Wonderful. And then last, if I'm not sure, last but not least, Alicia.
Hello, everyone. Alicia Chapman, she, her, committee member.
Okay, wonderful. So with that, we've got a brief hour here, and so I want to get us to the point. And I think with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Moses, who's going to facilitate us here. And Dr. Moses, you're just in time. I had just done the roll call, and I'll turn it over to you. And I think the point here we're at is to just introduce Maria Sippin, Chief of Staff for Councillor Green.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Welcome in, everyone. Because this is such a short meeting and so much to do, we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. Make sure that you're grounded, that you breathe while you're listening, that you're taking notes while you're listening, and I'd like to turn the meeting right over. Go right ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Moses. Hey everyone, for the record, my name is Maria Sippin, Chief of Staff for Councillor Mitch Green in District 4. I'm going to kick us off today. Councillor Green is in session right now. They're a little bit off their timing, but that's no surprise. It's really my pleasure to bring this to you today. Again, my pronouns are they or she. You can see that near my label. Thanks for your time. Thanks for creating this meeting. We thought it was a great opportunity to just showcase this as soon as possible, get the discussion going, and make sure we get your feedback so we know how to proceed, or we know how to just stop this in its tracks if you see that that's the appropriate way to go. I just want to talk a little bit about my office and Councillor Green. Our office values the Portland Clean Energy Fund. We value the committee, staff, and community leadership that's helped make this program so successful. I've experienced a lot of the newness, growth, and evolution with this program, and the celebrations and the challenges that came along with that as one of PCEF's first committee appointees in 2019, ending my almost 5 years with PCEF last year. So it's really great to be here. Now here in City Hall, as part of this council office, we're navigating a new form of government like all of you, and a city that's reorganizing. The city has the opportunity to keep improving, to keep demonstrating a city that works. And for Councillor Green and me, that means Portland is stronger because of the Portland Clean Energy Fund and what it's starting to deliver in these early years. My office is even more interested in opportunities for PCEF to be situated in this institution, or this enterprise, as the mayor calls it, where it could thrive the most for years to come. We're here because we want your feedback and your partnership in how council develops policy, especially related to PCEF. The committee has an important role for developing the recommendations that shape the program and makes recommendations that direct council to take action. This committee reinforces how the city implements climate action through PCEF and prioritizes frontline communities who are most impacted by climate change and what that means in the context of global and local climate impacts and threats we see today. We can go on to the next slide. I want you to know a little bit about my office too. In Councilor Green's office, I'm one of his 2 full-time staff people. I'm his chief. I have a policy coordinator who's Christian Aguinaga, and I can't wait to introduce you to him soon. I also have a part-time policy analyst, a senior policy analyst, and also an instructor at PCC, Eric Dean, who helps us with a lot of our economic analysis and helps us really move through this budget with just a clear lens and lots of savvy tools. Also, shout out to Jordan Carmors, who has been my calm sidekick. He's helped me navigate lots of fun milestones in this office, helps me navigate some crisis comms, and also has the pleasure of talking about PCEF with me with all of the wonderful things the program has done. So again, I'm really just going to walk through some basics of the context here. Councilor Green can join us at any moment, but I'm also happy to talk about the proposal, which you've had in your hands since mid to late April. We wanted this to be the first forum to discuss the proposal. So we haven't consulted with all areas of the city yet, and we're really bringing it to you here first. Next slide, please. So it's not news to anyone. The city is balancing a budget today with a historic shortfall. City Administrator Michael Jordan described the 93 million general fund gap when he published his draft budget recommendations in February. Since then, we have been anticipating deep cuts, especially to programs that are important to Portlanders, people of all ages, folks who depend on these programs for joyful safety, and all kinds of other things that are important to them. We've been listening to what's important to Portlanders who have been communicating their priorities through budget listening sessions, some of the written testimonies that have flooded our inboxes, and then ongoing engagement with members of our very own district, District 4. Just a little bit about District 4. I know the district numbering system is new to many people. District 4 covers all of the west side, west of the Willamette River. We've got all the way northwest up to Linton, southwest, West Portland Park, Multnomah Village, all of the southwest. And then we skip over the river. We've got Eastmoreland, Westmoreland, Sellwood areas. So we're bringing the PCEF proposal here because we've been trying to think creatively about some tools we can have in our back pocket as the budgeting season gets intense. Today is actually the kickoff of the official budgeting season where the mayor releases his proposed budget. So I think the timing of this is important, that we're not going to procrastinate when it comes to bringing a PCEF proposal forward. And we want to give you all time to be able to weigh some of the options or proposals or ideas that might be coming your way. So we're glad to be the second proposal to come to you. We know that City Council has used PCEF to balance the budget in recent years. I remember last year, we've authorized the use of interest. We expanded the use of PCEF to be able to fund bureaus. We've expanded the climate investment plan, and I'm really excited to see how that's come to fruition. I think the auditor's findings when PCEF was first audited and made recommendations to create the CIP, that was a big deal. And it was a wonderful experience to craft that all with so many of you. Next slide. I see Councilor Green has joined just in time for us to start talking about the proposal. If you'd like to have the proposal next to you, just to be able to skim it, you have all of that available to you on the PCEF website. Hopefully it was emailed to all of you just recently as well to bump it up into your inboxes. But we can spend a little more time here to talk about The details of the proposal, if we can wait till the very end for questions, that would be ideal. But if you need a clarifying question addressed right away, Sam, maybe you can help me moderate the chat or use the raise hand system so we could prioritize folks who are on stack. Counselor Green, if your audio is working, please unmute and say hello.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. And thanks for your patience. I was in a city council meeting, which is still ongoing. But I had a resolution that I carried that I needed to see through. And so thanks, Maria, for getting us started. I will say that Maria is no better expert on this subject, better than I for sure. And that's why I made that hire in large part. So thanks for kind of getting us started. I'll just jump right in, guys. Since I took office and since we started seeing the kind of early winter budget expectations from the city's budget office and the city administrator, I started to get a sinking feeling in my stomach, hearing other counselors and sort of other conversations around how we're going to close this gap. And I had heard ideas to go and reappropriate the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which would be sort of an implicit defunding of the CIP, which we approved last December. And so I started thinking about how can I offer something that provides an alternative to coming and raiding the fund while also being responsive to some of the things I've been hearing in the community at these budget listening sessions. So in broad strokes, it's really quite simple, but it's essentially the PCEF committee. We would ask the PCEF committee to think about and potentially recommend to council a loan from the PCEF contingency balance, which I think in the last slide deck that I got from staff was somewhere around $100 million. And that contingency balance is there for prudent use to cover a 5-year period of uncertainty for program expense. But my thinking is that if it's a loan with terms attached to it, with an interest rate attached to it, on a repayment period that returns those dollars back before those program expenditures come online, then it's a way to guard the PCEF fund from any attempt to call into question the choices we've already made with CIP, and it doesn't take away from our ability to execute. I think that there may be a slide. The next slide maybe have a graph. Yeah, so actually, if we go back one more, Maria, just really quickly, before I get further into details, I just want to set out here process-wise. I did not draft an ordinance to then refer to the climate committee to then convince my colleagues on city council to make a decision on this, because my view is we start with the PCEF committee. We start with the community and have these conversations first. I don't want PCEF committee members to find out about this after everyone else. And so this really is my attempt to take an idea which I think is creative, socialize it first in the environmental justice community before bringing something to council. So I think this last bullet point here is really important to stress, which is that if we go down this road and if this is something that the PCEF committee is comfortable with, then that loan really should be the last resort. After it, during the budget amendment process, we've tried to find every opportunity to avoid unacceptable cuts. And the mayor's budget gives us a good first starting point, but I think there are areas that I want to restore that are unacceptable cuts. So I just lay that out there before we go into the technical details. All right, so next slide, please. So here's the basic idea. When I saw this chart, I saw immediately what we basically have is a cash flow mismatch between revenues, existing fund balance year over year, and program expense. And much like any other program that we build from scratch that's new and transformative, it takes time to ramp up. We see this with the Preschool for All tax at the county. We see it with Portland Clean Energy Fund, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what we do see right here, and that the public sees, is a really large cash balance for the Portland Clean Energy Fund. And what they don't know is that those dollars have been spoken for. They are to be allocated for the entire period of the CIP plan. But what's also true by looking at this is that for the next few years, we're going to have more funds on hand than we need to draw upon for expenditure. And so the idea is if we were to authorize for the next budget fiscal year a very small loan, we could pay back that loan from the city's general fund on a timeline that returns those funds in time for them to be required and to be necessary by 28, 29, which is where we're going to start to see the fund balance be below revenues. And so this doesn't impact program delivery at all. It would make use of an interfund loan, which the city of Portland does all the time, which we have policies that put guardrails around it. Okay, I think the next slide has a little more detail on this. So I am an economist. I do this stuff. I've done this stuff for a living for a long time. And so I wanted to kind of lay out some figures to kind of provide a little more specificity and a little of like abstract thought around it. And to say at different loan amounts, here's what the general fund from the city of Portland would need to supply to pay back Portland Clean Energy Fund. So this sort of provides a table of the repayment costs. Are you guys hearing my audio without continent? Okay, good. So my thing is telling me otherwise. So what I've got here is a table that sort of lays out different loan repayment schedules for consideration. The idea is we would start repayment in the ensuing fiscal year, so it'd be 26, 27, and then pay it back before completion of the CIP 5-year plan. And at $20 million, what this would imply is a $7 million per year obligation to the general fund back to PCEF. At 40, it's 13, and so on and so forth. I do want to say here, as I have digested the mayor's budget, and it came out on Monday, I think we're all kind of working through it. I would not ask the PCEF committee to recommend any more than $20 million if we were to think about this at all. And so I don't think I have any interest myself to bring a motion to sort of borrow $80 million. But when I was drafting this is before I saw the mayor's budget and the $93 million budget gap that he was facing, and hearing some of my colleagues think about potentially trying to take those cash to pay for other expenditures. So maybe I'll just pause here and see if there's any questions on the table, because there's numbers on there, and in my experience, that's usually where folks need to get a little bit of a elucidation.
Let me know and I'll be glad to call on you. Committee members. Any questions?
And we can come back to. I'm happy. I've got my eye on the cell phone. If the council president calls me back for a vote, then I'll have to leave, but I think we're good for a while.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide then. So I also really believe in honesty and transparency. And, I think what we have with the Portland Clean Energy Fund and the voter intent by that is a very open, transparent, and community-driven process. And so if I was going to present a loan concept to the PCEF committee to then recommend to council as a tool during this budget crisis, I wanted to lay out the risks as transparently as I see them as an economist. And so I identify sort of 4 different risks. And in the document that I think we shared, I've got sort of mitigating ways to mitigate those risks, but I'll just lay these out in high level. For me right now, I think the highest risk that I see is the status quo. And this was especially salient before the mayor dropped his budget and we saw how he intended to balance. But doing nothing felt like we were in a space where there's mounting pressure, both inside City Hall and also mounting pressure, frankly, in the community among people who voted for this thing, to ask the question of why are we cutting and laying off all these parks maintenance people? Why are we closing community centers? Why are we laying off urban forestry staff when the Portland Clean Energy Fund has hundreds of millions of dollars just sitting there? And so in that moment, I knew that that's the wrong framing, but that was an opportunity where I needed to show some leadership and step up and say, well, those are 5-year funds, and we have this thing called the climate investment plan. But nevertheless, that created an opening to create a risk that there would be political pressure and the ability for city council to come in and say, we're going to go ahead and just take $100 million from the Portland Clean Energy Fund and defund the SIP and solve our budget that way. And so I started thinking about how can I be responsive to what voters at the budget listening sessions are saying, and also provide a sort of neutralizing pathway for city council to use if you need it as a tool. So the status quo, I think, is a risk that we need to think through. There's risk of council just defaulting. I mean, council, I guess, could choose in the future to ignore their previous ordinance and say, you know what, we're not gonna pay that back. And I think in the document, I list a couple mitigating factors to address that risk. One would be borrow a small amount, not a large amount. If it's a small amount of money, you can absorb that in your normal annual fluctuations and contingency balances. Just by way of reference, a couple weeks ago, I voted on a spring budget amendment that rolled $23 million of unspent balances over into the next fiscal year. And so that's pretty common to deal in those magnitudes of dollars as rollover. The other mitigating factor is that we can appeal. And if this goes before council with your recommendation, the ordinance would reference our own internal binding city policy. It is Policy Finance 2-12, which states the terms and conditions that council must abide by when they do pursue an interfund loan. And one of those terms is spelled out very clearly that these loans shall not be written off. So that is a city ordinance that is in code. So, if council wanted to go ahead and default on this at some future time, they'd be violating city code. They would also be violating Oregon state law for budgeting law, which says that municipal corporations are not to default on their loans. And so there's a sort of, when you think about default risk, you think about the order of payment. And the city of Portland would pay its loans and debts first, including internal debts, before it would pursue other programs. So I think that that's a pretty low risk, but I wanted to be honest because the question did emerge for me, and I know it's emerged for others. There's the risk that we're going to be in a budget crisis for several years. And so how does it work to add a general fund obligation here and then find ourselves in a cut year after year after year? And so that is a risk. Again, our budgets are a statement of our priorities. And in my view, I take the mayor at his face value when he says his sheltering plan is supposed to be temporary. And he's put funds in there that are temporary. And he's pursuing organizational efficiency approaches to changing from siloed bureaus to an enterprise model. Both of those things should result in expenditures rolling off in the next couple of years, while we also show internal general fund forecasts that are increasing. So I think we're gonna have the funds to pay this back, especially if the loan value is low and not high. And then finally, there's the precedent. And I think what folks would worry about, and what I worried about a little bit when I thought about this, is, well, what's to stop us from coming back to the well over and over again to saying, you know what, PCEF's now a bank. PCEF is a piggy bank, and so we go there not just this one time, but multiple times to solve our needs. And then we're in a situation where these other risks would compound, right? I'll just note that the PCEF fund will not stay in surplus as we execute the CIP. In the chart, Maria, can you go back like 2 slides, please? There's nothing to borrow. What this chart suggests is that we honor the promises that we made in the climate investment plan, and we honor the sort of code-based revision process that our PCEF chairs recently reminded council of, then we're going to spend this down as that green line ramps up. And so we'll be at a situation where there is no fund to borrow from. And so I think that's probably the best guard against this becoming like a precedent that we can go and borrow from it over and over again. So I'll just leave. So that wraps up kind of the risks that I've identified. If you can go back to the risk slide, and I don't know if there's any is there a final slide? Okay, summary. Yeah, let me close you out here on my pitch, and then we can have a dialogue. I think that we're in a moment where Portlanders are really wondering what kind of priorities we're going to make in the city. And what the mayor has proposed are pretty deep cuts in parks maintenance. I've heard very loudly from Portlanders that they don't want to cut parks maintenance. They want parks to stay maintained, bathrooms cleaned in parks, trees trimmed, and basically caring for that side of our community, right? This is a method to keep those parks maintenance whole, show voters that we are creative and that we are willing to use innovative tools where we have them. It also keeps PCEF whole. It doesn't call into question. It doesn't bring an ordinance forward that says, I disagree with the climate investment plan. I want to cut this. It reaffirms the climate investment plan, and it says, while the fund is in surplus for these next few years, it might be prudent to borrow from it, given that the committee feels the same way. And again, as I say, I think it's just a really good bulwark against cutting from the CIP, because it takes away the argument that we need those funds to fill our budget gap. My argument instead is to say we can borrow from this to address a short-term funding gap, and then we can pay for that through efficiency gains, and we can pay for that through maybe a new tax that someone might propose down the road. Who knows? But the point is we take the wind out of the sails of the kind of pro revised CIP people. And then I would just say it's good economics. I know that might sound counterintuitive. Like, isn't it bad to borrow? And I would just say that's what cities do. That's what governments do. We're supposed to borrow and use our available liquidity tools, or to put it more plainly, use debt responsibly, to make sure that we're preserving the administrative capacity of our city to deliver services for folks that need them. And then that helps kind of keep us from going down this doom loop spiral that I think a lot of folks have raised in the press recently. So I'll just leave it at that, and I'll take any questions you have for I think at least 15 minutes, depending upon whether I get called back into chambers.
Thank you so much, Councilor Green. So appreciate that. Ranfees, I was going to do a round robin, if that's all right. I want to make sure that we hear everybody's voices today. So I was going to start with Robin. Do you mind starting us off, kicking us off with questions or your initial thoughts? Either way.
Sure. Hi, Robin Wang. I'm a committee member, and I appreciate you taking the time and sharing with us this proposal first, as opposed to hearing it from the press or after the fact. It's something that kind of irked some of us on numerous occasions in the past. I think I used to be a business lender, so I kind of, seen similar scenarios, different scale, but, similar scenarios. And, first I want to say I'm fully appreciative of the situation the city is in. We don't, I don't think, I can't speak for everybody on the committee, but we don't have a blind eye, right, to what's going on in the city. And, to the extent that we can be helpful, we want to be, and we have been. I think it's important to state that the vast majority of PCEF funding today is going to city agencies already. So, we've done a lot to help, fund the existing programs for the city. But, I think you raised some good concerns and risks, and I just want to throw out some ideas or concepts that, I think would help further kind of mitigate that risk. One would be, some type of contingency, and, written into the initial agreement that, kind of states what happens, if there is a default, or if the city can't pay, whether it can't or chooses not to pay, make the repayments. And so one idea, I'm not saying this is the idea, open to other ideas, is the notion of, if the city defaults in $10 million, then, we pull back $10 million that has been previously committed through the CIP to a city agency. Now, we still lose that money, but the remaining priorities are not going to be impacted, by that. So some type of contingency would be, I think, helpful to reducing some risks. Would love to see, other repayment streams. So, for example, if, there is a surplus, then 50% of that surplus gets applied towards repaying the PCEF loan. So kind of a expedited repayment schedule of sorts. And 50% is just a number I picked off the top of my head. It doesn't have to be that. But some type of mechanism that allows PCEF to get its money back sooner than later under certain circumstances. And I think an acknowledgement that if the city can't pay it back or defaults on the loan, that it's treated as almost a new tax, because that's what it is. It's a reappropriating money for one purpose for another purpose. And while the intent is to pay it back, if it can't pay it back, then it's essentially a reappropriation. And I'm not a city finance person expert, but whatever processes need to be put around that, it should. And then I think the final thing I'll say is that I would opt for kind of smaller regular payments as opposed to one lump sum at the end, because I think that create a more high stakes environment at that future date. It just creates it for both us, the PCEF committee, and the fund, as well as the city council. And I think smaller, more periodic payments, reduces that high stakes environment. So many other thoughts, but those are the big ones, and I'll give fellow committee members a chance to chime in.
Thank you so much, Robin. D'Angelo, welcome in.
Hi, thanks. You caught me as I was kind of reaffirming my own thoughts, but I echo a lot of what Robin says. Obviously, we want to have the city thrive. I mean, if the city isn't thriving, we can't have a thriving PCEF committee, so a lot of the things that are being requested or asked of the committee are things that we take very, very, we take into consideration. My concern just consistently is acknowledging that, our city administrator himself recognizes that our city's revenues are down, that even if we consider a repayment plan, that we can't really guarantee that the city will have the revenue to even repay, whether it be 7, 13, 20, 40, 60, however many $1 million it is. So my concern just continues to be, one, is there even really a tangible way for us to have consistent repayment? And maybe that is smaller payments over, more time. There's that, but then there's also considering that while I appreciate Councilor Green specifically saying that we don't want to look at PCEF as a fund that we can just kind of go back to and consistently pull money from as like a slush fund, I guess, is, for lack of a better phrase, what I'll use. That's not to say that it doesn't create the precedent down the line if there is another situation like this in the city. So we may not be doing it in the short term, but it feels like this is an opportunity for PCEF to be looked at in that way as a piggy bank long term, because it does still set a precedent no matter how you slice it. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Alicia, welcome in. Any thoughts you want to put forth?
Yeah, I'll be brief because I think we all feel similarly. Given the alternatives for the city and for PCEF, I would have to support this plan.
Thank you so much. Meg, welcome in.
Hi, apologies for the delay. Yeah, thanks, Councilor Green and Maria, for your presentation and for following a really, what I hope is a good process and precedent setting around following the process we laid out in email and the one we want to work with council. With that, the PCEF committee has a voice in all PCEF related decisions. So just want to acknowledge that and your, I think, clear values alignment with a lot of PCEF. So with that said, I share a lot of, I'm listening deeply to my fellow committee members, particularly Robin with his finance background, and he asked a lot of the risk mitigation questions that I'd come into the meeting with. And I think they've been partially addressed, but I still have some concerns about some of that. And I think, but to bring up a few different points, I really like that you were committed to a lower end, the 20 million. I mean, I just think the risk is lower at smaller, although how could we be sure of that as it moves to council? So that's kind of one question I have when clearly then the need I'm seeing at the city budget is more than 20 million. And then another thing that hasn't been brought up, but Sam sent along also the PCEF surcharge forecast memo for April. And the economist in there, Peter Holzman, emphasizes that PCEF also is facing next 5 years of deep economic uncertainty. I mean, we all are. And so we're not even, a lot of this decision is based on, so we may be dealing with, who knows, different projections going forward. So there's just a lot of uncertainty that make me a little hesitant to think of this as a unlimited, or as this 100 million may end up not being such a thing if that economic uncertainty goes a certain way. Those are just some different points I'll raise, but in the case of, to save time and hear from other committee members, I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Meg. Welcome in, Faith.
Hi there. I don't have too much to add. I appreciate the presentation and the thoughtfulness that went into this proposal. I did want to just second a couple of things that Robin said, and Robin, I definitely appreciate your background and expertise in this matter, so I really appreciate that and having you have let us off. I do like this idea of kind of a backstop based on other city budgets that PCEF is funding for a repayment plan. And I also, I can't remember where I heard this, Councilor Green, if this was in your presentation or not, but this kind of the idea that this might not be a revolving fund, but rather a one-time and a single borrowing. So repayment wouldn't then make that that those funds available again during the borrowing period. I think I heard that, and I definitely like that as a that it fits the mission of the kind of filling a particular one-time gap versus an ongoing backstop. So I don't have anything else to add at this time, and we'll save time for other committee members. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Faith. Welcome in, Tracy.
Hi there. Thanks so much for the presentation, Councilor Green. I may have missed a portion of it. I had to dial in and had difficulties hearing a portion of it, so I may have missed this, but I wanted to know, had the city explored other traditional lending options, number one. Number two, I'm curious about the city's long-term plan for addressing the budget shortfall. Certainly we would be, if at all, just that, potential one-time lever that we could, potentially support. But I'm really curious about the long-term plan, because I just, I need to understand how the city plans on being solvent long-term before offering this as a support. Your presentation did show that you are willing to consider a smaller loan as opposed to up to the 100 million. But again, I don't know that that really addresses the full problem. And, all of us here are very supportive of the city of Portland remaining that, wonderful, beautiful, safe place to live. So that's it. I mean, I echo what my peers have already said, the concerns about the lending, but I think that's my comments. I'll Elmo myself, as they called it.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Ranfees, welcome in.
Yep. Hi. Thank you again, Councilor Green, for joining us, and Maria. I just want to again echo Meg's comments again, for honoring our request for process. And I appreciate you just taking the time to present while you have another council meeting going on right now concurrently. So appreciate again being here. What I think just echo, I think the concerns here that's already been laid out, just the precedent being set. What does this open up for the future? And then I think just echoing Tracy's comments, like what's the long-term viability? When I think, as just doing a quick review of the mayor's proposed budget, the mayor's message, clearly articulates that, the city's going to need to explore changing or adding new revenue strategies, calling out structural revenue challenges within, PBOT. So I think those are things that that gives me pause, that I think, if, and I'm not a lender, but if, I were to lend money to someone and they're already saying, well, we might need to raise revenue for other things, and we don't know what that is or the plan, that gives me pause to say, yeah, I don't, really trust, yet, knowing what the plan is for the city to repay back. So I think that's important. I think, again, that's not my role as a committee member to say what the city should or should not do. I think it's just my role as a committee member, of this program and to be steward to ask the tough questions. I think that's just what we're all here for. And, again, I think we look forward to like any updates from the city and the mayor as ideas come up. But I'll just say again, those are just the things that give me pause. But again, with the city, city's cuts, 180 cuts, proposed cuts from city positions is not a fun conversation to have. I think you've already noted most of those are for maintenance. Those are going to be really important roles within the city. We will feel that at some point in stage. Thankfully, we're not cutting community centers, but again, I think we're at this period to sort of honor just the importance of what an 8,000, city employee, institution looks like. And I think again, I think, yeah, again, not going to rehash the concerns in this plan, but do want to do, the due diligence here, and making sure, we are asking the right questions and, guaranteeing whatever proposal comes before this committee from council, we are asking the right questions. So I do hope, Sam and team, that we get to revisit this on May 15th, but I know there are probably other questions that might come up here.
Thank you so much, Ranfis. Councillor Green, do you want to address any specific questions right now before you need to leave?
I would love that opportunity. Thank you so much. And I also want to just express my gratitude for the thoughtfulness in these questions. And you guys are also thinking about the viability of the city as a whole. So I just want to make sure I uplift that not once, but twice, but maybe many times the PCEF committee has thought about the city's broader interests and not just this fund. There's a couple areas that I think I can respond to. For instance, on Robin, on your comments, all of those seem like really reasonable things. They're very conventional from a risk management perspective. That's my background. If we got to the point where this committee was supportive of seeing a draft ordinance that made the loan possible, I would welcome that feedback and see how we can incorporate that sort of comments. I think it's a no-brainer to say that there is a trigger clause that if the city council for some reason thinks it doesn't want to repay its loan, then it's just an automatic reduction in kind to the bureau allocations. I think that makes sense, but I think that also brings me back to another point that I just want to make sure is pretty clear. We have binding city policy that says we do not default on our loans. And I think it would there's a pretty high hurdle for city council to pass a code change to nullify that and to violate city law and also state law. And, that may have been possible in a previous city council where no one's paying attention, but with 12 city council members who are quite vocal and a very engaged community, I think that's a pretty low risk. The other piece is the sort of question of actual solvency. What happens to our finances in a broader sense, our expenses relative to revenues. And the city has a risk management policy for reserves. And we have a reserve policy that says, if your revenue is hitting zero and you need to pay back your debts, you tap those reserves, and that's what they're there for. And so we can't use those to fund budget gaps, but they are there to provide liquidity to make sure we pay our debts. And so we've got, I think, multiple tools that are a safeguard on the very technical debt repayment piece. But I think what I'm hearing is a broader concern about the politics and the commitment. And if there's desire to see an ordinance version of this, I'm happy to put in that ordinance a number of commitments and sort of off ramps here. I will also say that, at $20 million, I don't think 3 years is required necessarily to pay this back either. I think it's like this could just be a 1 year within fiscal year loan, because I have seen revenue proposals that I'll have to vote on from the mayor's plan that actually make possible the mayor's proposals. And those I support, frankly. And I may bring proposals of my own that increase those. And so if there is a tax revenue piece that we can create new revenues by sort of addressing it on that side, those won't flow immediately. So what I want to avoid here is this idea that we start laying people off in the beginning of the year, only to hire them back on the back end back half of the year at greater expense. And so like pairing a revenue strategy with a loan could potentially be a very useful bridge concept. I'm not aware of any new revenue proposal beside what's in the mayor's proposed, but that is also something to consider. And I think that would sort of tighten up some of the risk concerns. And then I think there was another question. I think it came from, oh, Tracy, I think you raised a really good question about like, what is the long-term fiscal health of the city? And I think what I would say to that is that this is a bridge loan for me sends a very clear signal to middle income families who are, by the way, the ones leaving our county. You'll hear the business community talk about how it's the tax on the highest earners that are driving people out. That's not true. The census data shows that it's middle income families that go to our adjacent counties, and they are being priced out of our county. And they're starting to leave our county because they are not seeing the sort of services at a cost for their families that they can afford. And part of that is parks. Part of that is after school programs. And so I'm thinking if we can send a very strong signal that this budget and this tool as part of that budget is doubling down on our communities and our families, then that will stop that outflow process, and we'll recover our tax revenue base. So I know that's a little bit philosophical, but that's how I think about it. And I'm just trying to communicate like my economic lens on that. And I think, everything else, what I'm hearing is feedback. I'm hearing kind of like a sort of uncertainty and concern about precedent setting. And that's useful for me to hear. And I've taken all these notes. And so I'm not asking for a decision right now, but I am asking that the committee think about this and maybe discuss, and then potentially if we want to move forward on May 15th, I might ask for a decision on that time. And I just hope that you'd be open to that.
Thank you so much. Maria, if you want, go right ahead. We have a little bit of time. Thank you so much, Councilor Green.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to council chambers, but thank you so much. I appreciate your service to the city.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I'm glad we're talking about what is the city doing to raise revenue. That's such an important question today, and you'll hear the mayor talk about that later this afternoon when he debuts his proposed budget at a big town hall. We're going to be here till about 10 p.m. tonight. There's all kinds of activity in City Hall. We don't expect you to tune into all of it, but from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. is the public testimony moment, and then we have breakout sessions after that. But I just met with PBOT yesterday, and they gave me a little bit more detail around what revenue streams are built into the assumptions of the mayor's balanced budget. So one, parking management. There's going to be an increase in parking districts and additional increases in event districts. So council is actually voting on that this morning, or maybe it's like first reading of it, but you can expect them to discuss more about the need for increasing parking fees. Next is the transportation network company fees. That's Uber and Lyft, and increasing from 65 cents to $1.30 for those rides. So that's the amount or rate that was agreed upon with lots of stakeholders in their engagement process. So if council supports that, that gets built into the mayor's budget. So if you've been a fan of increasing those types of fees, that's being heard today, and that's going to factor into how the mayor balances the budget and sustains PBOX resources. And then the third is the state transportation funding bill, which we've been watching closely. It's the part we're most concerned about. Personally, I think we've seen some of the things happening in the legislature recently, and the part that's carved in for Portland is at risk, and I think the entire package as a whole. But if that doesn't pass, PBOT is expecting then those types of cuts. So we're talking about transportation safety, safe routes to school, potentially Sunday parkways, a lot of things that folks are worried about losing. Even the Street Plaza program, which we saw thrive during the COVID pandemic. The mayor is optimistic that he can restore all those programs.
Thank you, Maria. Sorry to interrupt you. Right. But I think it would be helpful if we did a temperature check on the ordinance. to have approval, have a temperature check of this committee on moving forward with an ordinance, would have a proposal. So I would love to hear just red, yellow, green. Yes. Robin, would you like to move forward? Red, yellow, green.
I think yellow with green if the number is smaller and smaller.
Very good. D'Angelo.
Yellow.
Thank you. Alicia.
Green.
Thank you. Meg.
Yellow.
Wonderful. Faith.
I suppose I'm green to see something.
Wonderful. Thank you. Tracy.
Yellow.
Thank you so much. Ranfis.
This is an interesting question. So
Yeah.
I will just say that I feel like we need more time to discuss this. I don't want to give a false signal to both the counselor and for council that this temperature check is that we support an ordinance or against the ordinance. So I just want to be clear on that because I want to be careful with what we're saying. I just want to thank Maria and the counselor for giving us this option to say yes or no to getting an ordinance drafted. That's one. I don't think it's, necessary, but it seems like an extra step. So want to just appreciate that. I think so. I just want to get that pretext here before I give my answer. I am also a yellow. There are some reds for me. I think there are pieces of information that has been provided today that's good, but I think part of due diligence is sort of verifying some of the information. So, so I don't want to go through all of them, but I do want to at least have a chance between now and the 15th to flag that for the committee and for Sam and team for us to follow up with the counselor Maria.
Beautiful. Thank you so very much, everyone. I also want to let everyone know that is viewing this, that there will be public comment at the beginning of our May 15th meeting and be able to listen to the community, take that comment, and then be able to continue on with this discussion. Sam, would you like to wrap us up, please?
I think you've got it there. I think what we'll do here is we'll follow up Renfis and see some of those other pieces of information that can be helpful for you all. We'll pick this conversation back up on the 15th, along with just providing you all with more context on the budget forecast, on the fund forecast. Apologies. As well as giving you all some context on anything else that's coming up in the budget process. So we'll be ready to do that next week, as well as give you all some space to think about this, raise any more questions for us to see if we can bring back more information for you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Deeply appreciate you being with us, Maria, and Councilor Green for his thoughtfulness, for all your thoughtfulness. We will see you next week and we'll adjourn now. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.